All right, class. First off, as always, good day. I'm glad you're here. Today we're going to be talking about basically the unification of Germany and two other countries during this time. Now, here's the thing. I know this whole section is about imperialism, and we're supposed to be talking about how um, countries like Russia, Germany, Britain, how they um, basically take over areas of the world. They claim as, you know, this is mine, this is mine. Places that are already inhabited, people live there already. But the reason why we're not focusing on that, especially a time called imperialism, it's mainly because after this we're going into World War One, and I want you to see the the fighting between two several countries and some um, anger that one another is going to hold against one another. So while Britain and Russia and Germany and they're starting to take little parts around the world, you know, um, we're really going to focus on things that are leading up to World War One. Okay, so we're going to analyze Otto von Bismarck's plan to gain more territory for Prussia. Okay, then we're going to examine how Britain was able to avoid a revolution while every other country was basically having one. You know, so you're going to see what they did to avoid that. And lastly, we're going to create an argument on whether two countries merging could actually work without any problems. All right, so here is your warm up picture. The first question asks you, um, what are the three countries that are basically grabbing other countries? All right, so if you look at the bags, you will see the names of the three countries. The one in the far back might be a little bit hard to read, so you may have to like pause it and then like really look um, to see. The next question asks you, the British people, why do you think they're not grabbing anything? You see the two other countries, taking parts of the map, right? Why do you think the British isn't? Okay. And the third question is basically, why do you think that the Americas aren't shown? You see Africa, you see Asia, you see Europe on there on the part of the world that the three countries are basically taking. Why don't you think they show North America, you know, and South America? Why do you think that they're not taken from that part of the world? Okay. So pause the video, answer those three questions. Um, Once you're finished, we're moving on. Okay. So we are moving on right now in three, two, one. All right. So Otto von Bismarck, if you guys remember, he's the prime minister of Prussia. Basically, he had a foreign policy which would lead them to war. Remember, foreign policy is like a how would you handle relationships with another country? His is basically let's go to war. Um, in 1864, Prussia defeated Denmark and Austria, and because of those victories, they gained more territory. 2 years later, June 14th, 1866, Austria is like, you know what, we can take them again. Come on. So they go attack Prussia one more time. And less than a month later, the war ends. Um, Austria loses, and Austria is just humiliated again. Okay, so two back to back just losses. This is going to come back again in the lesson, so just keep that in the back of your mind. Austria has lost twice to Prussia. Now, Prussia got the northern German states to join them. They're like, hey, Remember the last class last week, I told you guys how Germany really needed Prussia more than Prussia needed Germany. Well, now Prussia's like, you know what? Let's talk about this unification. So the northern states joined them no problem. Um, the southern states, however, were kind of reluctant. They kind of held back a little bit because, yeah, they were scared of them. But the thing is, the southern states, they were predominantly Catholic, and the Prussians were Protestant. And they figured, if we join up with them, they're going to persecute us. They're going to make us change from Catholic to Protestant, you know. And especially back then, religion was a huge thing, you know. However, with that being said, those German southern states, they were more scared of the French. Because remember what happened with Napoleon the First? He just basically took over and stuff like that. Um, so they were more scared of the French than they were of the Prussians, forcing them to change religion. So the southern German states said, you know what, fine, we'll join you guys. It's either you or France, and we'd rather go with you guys. Okay. So 1870. Here's the thing. And I've told you guys this before, how sometimes kings and queens in different kingdoms, they would basically marry off their kids to kind of make peace, between two countries. And there was a situation that came up. The king of Prussia supposedly was the next in line to be the heir of or king of Spain. France had a big problem with that because again, Prussia is already getting big. They're already very powerful, and to then all of a sudden, the king of Prussia is going to be also the king of Spain, and right in the middle between the two is France, and France is like, no, 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 because you know they could get their soldiers from Prussia to attack, and then get the soldiers from Spain to attack, and then they got two enemies coming at them at the same time from two different fronts, and their backs are being against the wall. So France really challenged the legitimacy, saying there has to be somebody, next. It can't be just the king of Prussia who's going to be next. There has to be a distant cousin, a relative, somebody who's next in line. Now, Otto von Bismarck, at this point, he's basically like that little brother or sister you have, maybe a little cousin, somebody who is like knows how to annoy you, you know, and just poke at you, right? They know how to push your buttons, they know how to get you to react. And that's what Otto von Bismarck is to France. He's that little kid just like, what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? I'm not touching you. I'm not touching you. I'm not touching you. He's doing stuff like that to irritate France, right? But he's literally not doing. I'm not touching you. He's not doing that. He's basically saying stuff like, "Oh, look at our king, the next king of Prussia and Spain. Oh yes, yes, no, he's the next in line, and he's gonna do a marvelous job. And oh, our country is gonna be so powerful, nobody can challenge us." So Bismarck is doing all kinds of stuff to anger France. And it gets to the point where France declares war on Prussia on July 13th, 1870. Thing is, this is exactly what Bismarck wants. He wanted Russia to declare war on them and attack them, um, because it just made their counterattack just like, hey, we're just protecting ourselves. But he wanted war, and bam, they kicked the butt um, out of France. They just beat them so senseless. It's ridiculous. September 2nd, 1870, at Sedan. Here's a great example. Um, the Prussian army, is basically around. They can't be seen, and what happens is the French army comes through, and the Prussian army just basically surrounds them. Um, this is where it gets even more embarrassing. The person who was in charge, who was there, the highest ranked person, was actually the ruler of France, which was Napoleon III. He is the grandson of Napoleon Bonaparte, and he basically led his whole group to his whole army to be captured. Um, and by January 28th, Paris surrenders to Prussia. And under the treaty, they had to pay 5 billion francs. You heard that right. 5 billion francs, which is basically their dollar, the French dollar. And they had to give up land. So not only did they lose land, but they had to give up so much money um, to Prussia. France is extremely upset, as you can imagine. And a lot of the French people and soldiers and leaders are like, you know what? We're going to remember this. We're going to get you back. They basically vow revenge, but they don't say when. They don't say how. But they're like, we're going to get revenge on you guys. We're going to get you. So here's my first question to you. What do you think France is going to do to get revenge? Do you think they'll like do a sneak attack? Do you think they'll try to kill um, the king of Prussia? Do you think they'll go after Otto von Bismarck? Um, do you think they'll try to sabotage Prussia somehow? What do you think they're going to do to get revenge? And the other question is, the part of this question is, do you think they'll get their revenge like right away, like attack, or do you think they'll wait? Do you think they'll wait and just, maybe not today, not tomorrow, but someday soon, you know, when do you think they'll attack or get their revenge? Okay, so there's the writing prompt on the bottom. Okay, do you think it's gonna be days, months, years when they get their revenge? What do you think? Okay, so go ahead, write your response, pause the video, but we're moving on in 3, 2, 1. So January 18th, 1871, Bismarck and like 600 German princes, nobles, and generals all are in the Hall of Mirrors of Versailles, which is right here. This is a picture of it. Beautiful setting. Excuse me. Now, William the First of Prussia, the King of Prussia, is proclaimed the Kaiser, which basically means emperor. Well, in literal sense, it means Caesar in German, but also means like king, emperor of the Second German Empire. Now, some people might be thinking, well, was there a first German Empire? Yes, there was. During the medieval times, it was known as the Holy Roman Empire. Okay. Um, and that's why when we get to World War II, you'll hear Hitler call the Nazis the Third Reich, you know, the third basically kingdom, because there was two before him, and this is the second one. Now, the Prussian monarchy and the army had achieved German unity. They basically did what the Germans wanted. They absorbed them all together, and they unified into one country. So those northern states, southern states, Prussia, they all united and formed one Germany. Now, with their resources and their military strength, Germany, the unified Germany, had now become the strongest power in the European continent. They were now the biggest, baddest group around. Before, for years, for centuries, it was like England and then like France. Now Prussia, well, Germany now, became number one. So now we come to England. And the question is, how did they avoid revolution? Well, the thing is, there was actually times when people were talking about a revolution, get rid of the king and queen and things like that. Um, in 1832, to kind of calm the people down a bit, they basically said, okay, you know what? We're going to allow, instead of the top men, you know, be able to vote, we're going to expand it. Okay. We're going to allow, um, basically, if you have a job, you have a home, you, excuse me, you can vote. Okay. So this included a lot more males. So the guys were like, okay, yeah, I like that. Now I can have my voice heard. Okay, so they started calming down. Um, about 20 30 years later, um, another type of reform was made. Um, basically, the kingdom basically gave away some rights. The power they had, they knocked down their own power and gave it to the people. And this again brought people to realize, like, okay, cool, all right, so that they're not as the king, queen, and all them, they're not as powerful as they were before. They gave us some rights. Awesome. At this time, there's some Irish nationalist people who were like, well, you're giving the English people rights. What about us? You know, what about us Irish over here? Because remember, Ireland was controlled by the British, and the British kind of like, no, 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 you just go away. You stay over there. Hush, adults were talking. They basically kind of did that to the Irish. Um, and due to the economic growth of the middle class, the idea of revolution kind of went away because people were making more money. And when people are making more money, they tend to live better, dress better, eat better. They they tend to enjoy life a little bit more when they have money in their pocket and they're able to do things. So because the like minimum wage back then basically raised up, the wages raised up, people were now having more money, so they started living comfortably, eating better. Like I said, you could buy a home. So the struggle wasn't as bad because the people had money. And that's how the England avoided revolution. They gave people some rights, a little bit here and there, not a lot, but just enough. And then they raised the money that they made at jobs. So people were happy to go to work. People were happy that how life is going for them. So the idea of revolution, it kind of went to the back burner. They're like, well, why ruin this great thing that's happening for us? So the idea of revolution, it went away, and that's how uh, Britain kept the king and queen system going on. So here's your next question. What do you think is more important, money or freedoms? Okay. Now, here's the thing. I know some people will try to say in the past, because I've asked this question before, and they go, well, money, because then I could buy my freedom. Well, in this scenario, you can't buy your freedom. You can't. So either you are going to be have to listen to the government, and they're going to, when they tell you something, you have to listen to them, things like that. But you'll be living pretty well. You'll be having a good amount of money, you know. Or would you be, basically dirt poor? You're really struggling to raise up, but you have freedoms. You have rights that the government can't take away. Which one do you think you'd rather have? And honestly, guys, be honest. Don't look for the PC answer, the political correct answer. Be honest. Which one to you is more important? Okay. So take a minute, think about it, write down your response, pause the video, but we're moving on in three, two, one. So, like I was telling you earlier, Austria is in a very unique situation. Um, the citizens in the country are from different ethnic groups, right? It's not just people from Austria. There's people from France, Germany, Russia, the Middle East. Austria has a lot of different people there, and they basically want independence. Not everyone, but a lot of them. But the government's like, no, 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 no independence for you guys. Now, like I told you, Prussia beat them bad twice. And because of this, their army is hurting, right? There's some people who, are so hurt that they can't join the army again. And there's some people who are like, well, I'm not going to join the army. Look what happens to all our soldiers. And there's some who are like, well, I'll join, but I want independence. And so Austria is in a situation where like they have no army, and they feel like if they don't get an army quick, they're going to be like other countries around the world are going to just come and start attacking them. Now they did have one friend, which was Russia. But if you remember from a couple weeks ago when I talked to you about the Crimean War, when Russia wanted to go through their land to attack the Ottoman Empire, and Austria said, no, we don't want your war in our area, so you can't go through our land. They burned that bridge. Because remember, Russia lost bad to the Ottoman Empire, Britain, and France. And Russia basically said, you know what? You and us, we're enemies now. So with that being said, um, Austria lost their only real friend who has power. They have no one else. And just like they feared, it happened. The country Hungary, which is next door to them, basically attacked Austria and forced them into this thing called the Compromise of 1867. What the compromise basically meant was that um, Austria and Hungary would become one, basically one country, but they would still be their own countries, but they would united. Each would have their own constitution, their own legislative, their own government, their own capital. Austria's capital is Vienna, and Hungary's capital is Budapest. Okay, so they are different countries. They have their own stuff, but they're united. How they're united is that they have one king, one monarch. And it just so happened that the person who was in charge is somebody that they both like. Um, he's the emperor of Austria, and he's the king of Hungary, and that was Francis Joseph, this guy right here with those mean chops. Um, both sides liked him, so it was like, yeah, cool, he's the guy. Um, However, Austria-Hungary basically had one army, right? They united their armies. Their foreign policy was the same, and they had the same type of money. So before, when Austria had their own money, Hungary had their own money. Now that they were combined, they basically said, no, no, no. No, we need to have one type of money so you can go from Austria to Hungary and vice versa, and you won't have to worry about like, oh, changing your dollars because they have the same dollars. You know, not everyone at that time had the same dollars. Okay, hope you understand that. But once they united, they said, okay, let's make our dollar the same. Um, with this unification of Austria and Hungary, it became a very large and powerful country now. Now, here's the thing. Would they be better with allies? Definitely. With friends? Absolutely. But did they need them? Now, not so much. They really didn't now. Um, they could handle themselves. Okay. So here's my question to you. Like I said, Austria and Hungary are right next to each other, so they combined. If we had to merge with either Mexico or Canada, which country do you think we'd work better with and why? So what do you think? Which country do you think we would work better with? Mexico or Canada? Okay. So there's a writing prompt on the bottom. I believe that the United States and again, you put Mexico or Canada, merge together, we would work together because, and then why? Why do you think that we would work well together with either Mexico or Canada? We had to, if we had to merge like Austria-Hungary did. Okay, so uh, pause the video, write down your response, but we're moving on in 3, 2, 1. All right, so now we've come to the last question, the exit ticket. The first one asks you, how would you characterize Bismarck? Do you think he was a genius or do you think he was a tyrant, basically a bully? And why did you choose that? So justify your response and use facts that you've learned from this lesson and the previous lesson to back you up to say whether he was a genius or a tyrant. The next question asks you, give you an example of how Britain was able to avoid a revolution, and why do you believe that example worked? So again, go back to that section if you forgot and look through those and say, you know what, um, they were able to avoid a revolution because of this, and why was that so significant? Why was that so important? How did that work? Okay. The third one said, if you were beating an enemy in war and they surrendered, would you stop and accept their surrender, or would you ignore it and keep on fighting? Right? So think about that. You're going to war, you're fighting some other country, and they throw up the white flag. We surrender, we surrender. Do you stop and accept their surrender, and capture them? Or do you keep fighting, keep attacking them? Why did you come with that decision? Okay. This is another one of for you to be honest. Tell me the truth. What would you do? And then why would you do it? Back up your reasons why you would do that, whether you accept a surrender or not. Okay. So once you finish this, you are done for the class. I know this one took a little bit longer than the other ones, but there's just so much in there. And again, it's vital that you learn about this because when we get to World War One, all this stuff is going to come back to play. Okay. So you guys have a good day. You take care and you be safe. All right.